Good morning, Chairman.
Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Environmental Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Adrian Findlay, the Chairman of the committee, and sitting to my right is Vice Chairman Councillor Raymond Whittaker. In addition to welcoming all members to the committee this morning, I would like to welcome Councillor Danny Brooks, Executive Councillor for the Environment. Before we begin, there is a standard announcement. If we have a fire alarm, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors, into the reception, assemble out in the car park, on the front of the building and wait further instructions. The audio-visual feed of this formal meeting is now being broadcast live via the council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online. Please check that any mobiles, laptops, tablets are on silent mode. The hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collated at the top table. Please indicate early when you wish to speak. Now move on to the formal agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence and replacement members.
No apologies, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of members' interest. Do any members wish to declare any interests? No, thank you. Item 3, minutes of the meeting of the Environmental Scrutiny Committee held on the 13th of February 2026. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. These pages can be found on pages 5 to 12 of the agenda pack. Do we have a proposer? Councillor Sneath. A seconder? Councillor Woods. All those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? Yeah, thank you. Those minutes are agreed as a true record. Item 4, announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. As Chairman, I have no announcements. Are there any announcements from Councillor Danny Brooks, the Executive Councillor for the Environment? Councillor Brooks, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to give a brief update on the environment portfolio. I'll start with flood risk management, which is always a contentious issue. We currently have 9 ongoing Section 19 investigations covering 11 properties across the county. This reflects the recent localised flooding on the 28th of February, where heavy rainfall fell on already saturated ground. I can reassure members that these investigations are progressing as expected and are anticipated to be completed within the required 6-month time frame. Alongside this, our focus remains on long-term resilience, working with partners through wider flood programmes, i.e. the 2100 programmes. On Better Streets for Lincolnshire, we continue to deliver practical improvements that residents can see in their local areas. In terms of the waste services, as you all know, the preparations are well underway for the introduction of weekly food waste collections, which is in line with the national requirements. And finally, I note the confirmation that the work has started on the North Icombe Relief Road, which will support long-term growth and connectivity in the county. Chairman, our focus remains on steady delivery, practical outcomes, and ensuring these services work effectively for the residents we serve. Thank you. Willing to take any questions?
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Do we have any questions for Councillor Danny Brooks? Councillor Baxter, please.
Thank you. Can you tell us, can you confirm, please, whether or not the waste minerals plan preferred approach will be presented to this committee on the 15th of May and therefore published several days beforehand? Or better still, would it be possible for members to see an advance copy of the preferred approach?
Yeah, I'm assured that it will be presented here in May, and I will find out about whether we can have whether members can get a pre-look at it or of the confirmed plan. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Carrington.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning. 3 questions for Councillor Brooks. First one, you mentioned Section 19s. Always a concern there, particularly in terms of resources. I take it, or can we take it, that if these are going ahead on time, as you say, that we do have internally adequate resources to deal with those. I'll perhaps take these individually, Chairman, with your permission.
Yeah, I think, do you want to take that one, Chris?
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Carrington. Yeah, so those reports that were listed, those 9 covering 11 properties, they will be dealt with within the performance indicator timeframe of the 6 month. So we have got the resources at the moment. Obviously, depending on the weather, and as we saw in the Bet and Henk previously, sometimes we may have to go out and use consultancy to fill the gap. But under sort of steady state, as it were, we believe our resources are sufficient at the minute.
Thank you very much. That's good news, and I think we should acknowledge the hard work our officers do on these inquiries. They're technically quite challenging in many cases, but they're enormously important. My second question, we have a consultation from the government at the moment on the role and funding of internal drainage boards, and I just wondered whether, as lead local flood authority, this council was contributing to that, and if so, what the stance was.
Yeah, we are. I'm a member of that board that's doing it, so we are involved. At the minute, I think, dare I say, it's falling on deaf ears with the government, but we will keep trying.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from. And the final point, Chairman, I just wanted to make, Councillor Brooks referred to food waste collection starting imminently. I just wanted to say, as a dual-hatted member, I'm also a member of North Kesteven, the Waste Collection Authority. I just wanted to pay tribute to everybody at the County Council, including our hard-working officers, for working together with the waste collection authorities to make this thing work. Certainly in my neck of the woods, it's looking very, very promising indeed. And I think that's a tribute to everybody working together over a really quite a long period of time to deliver this important result. Thank you, Chair.
Totally agree, and everyone working together is making it happen. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. So, yeah, and well done to your district council.
Do we have any? Thank you for that. Do we have any more questions for Councillor Brooks? No, thank you. Do we have any announcements from chief officers? None?
No announcements for myself, thank you.
Oh, I didn't know that. Sorry. Right, thank you. We can now move on to the next item. Item 5, Flood Risk Management Authorities Update. This item will be presented as a verbal report. This will be introduced by Matthew Harrison, Flood Risk Water Manager. I believe...
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Finley.
Yeah.
Matthew's not with us today, but he's provided me with some notes.
Yeah,
so,
that's what you said earlier on. Sorry, I do apologise.
It's all right. So I can pick that up before passing over to Morgan, who's obviously here from the Environment Agency this morning.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So, yeah, I've been provided with a report to just feed back, and Councillor Brooks has already mentioned the Section 19 reports, which is was covered. Just to bring the committee's attention to the Property Flood Resilience Scheme that we've been running for the past nearly 18 months now, whereby we were providing a sum of money to affected residents who'd been flooded in the January 2025 floods, and then once we'd been through those affected, we would then on a phased basis roll it out to others that had been affected in floods in previous circumstances, such as storms Henk and Storm Babette. So just to give an update on how that's gone, in the first phase we invited 149 properties to apply and received 39 applications. In phase 2 there was 19 invited, of which 3 took up the application, and then in phase 3 there was 172 invited with 12 uptakes, and then for the final phase is 172 invited with 12 uptakes. So as you can see, we've had a limited amount of uptake, 33 applications have received their £2,500 upfront payment. 13 applicants have informed us that works are fully completed, of which 5 have also had post-installation audits completed by our consultants that have to go out and check that the work's been done appropriately, and 8 are now awaiting that survey as well. I'll happily take questions on each of the individual bits. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Chris, please? Councillor Reeve.
Thank you. Has anybody questioned the people that haven't taken up the offers and said what is wrong with the offers or whatever, to say why it hasn't been 100% take up? Because it's quite a devastating thing to have your home flooded.
There is still a little bit of time yet. We were looking to do that as part of an evaluation at the end of the scheme, because you're quite right. We want to know, what was the barrier to people taking up, the offer of grant funding to better protect their houses. You would think that, that would be a good thing for most property owners, but for whatever reason, some people have not taken that up. And we need to understand why. There may be some issues regarding how they feel that might affect their insurances and things like that, so they'd just rather not take it on. But until we ask those questions, we won't know. But we've got to do an evaluation process when we're a bit further through the final phase.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. On a similar theme, have you had feedback from anyone that they feel compelled to use a particular provider as directed by the county council? I've had some informal feedback along those lines. People would rather have a choice of who to do the works, but they feel directed by the county.
Okay, so it depends in which scheme it fell in. So the scheme that we put in 18 months ago on the back of being awarded some funding out of the full council AGM at the time, if you recall, of £1 million. That was to reflect a scheme that had already been ongoing, but which was government-led. And the one that the government led was far more restrictive in terms of who you could and couldn't use. Ours, the county council one, which has been running for the last 18 months, is less restrictive, because we recognised that was a barrier to some people, that they were being pushed down a route, and there was few people who were sufficiently accredited across the whole of the Midlands area, and we were competing with Northamptonshire at that time as well, post Babette and Henk. So it was a difficulty in that kind of having the right amount of potential people to deliver the works. So we recognise that. So for our scheme, we're a little bit less concerned about that side of things. Obviously, there are checks and balances. We need to make sure that people, the work is undertaken by a competent person, and that's why we have to have it signed off at the end. But yes, for our scheme, that should be a bit easier to deal with. But we couldn't do anything with the government-led scheme, the initial scheme, because that was strictly tied down by the government.
I forgot my question. It's about the provision of the Section 19 reports. We have a provider that's contracted to do the Section 19s for us, or a range of providers. Question 1, when does that contract, if it exists, get renewed? And question 2, is there sufficient people in the marketplace to do if we needed to do that again, God forbid, a lot of Section 19s in a hurry, would there be capacity out there to do it in a more timely fashion than last time?
So we now have a number of potential companies that can undertake that work off a framework for procurement. We are hopeful, well, we remain hopeful that we can deal with most things in-house at most times. It's only if we have a major storm event when it inundates, for want of a better term, our own staff, that we would have to then go out to consultancy. So anything that's ongoing, they'll still be completing at the moment, but they should now finish pretty much. So everything else is now being done in-house until such a time as we need to. And then we would just go back to the framework to get those people who we trust to carry on doing it. And it should be a quicker process this time because we've been through that process before.
Thank you very much. Do you have any other questions for Chris, please? No. All right, thank you. We've got Morgan. Was you giving us an update?
There's a presentation lined up, so
Yeah, lovely.
to go to that. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start, I think it's probably just reflecting. I was talking to Councillor Brooks before the meeting started. We've had the wettest November to February on record for this area. and that follows one of the driest summer periods on record as well. So we've seen both sort of near drought conditions and obviously followed by a very wet winter. On the positive side, the type of rainfall we've had over the winter period has enabled a lot of those sort of water stocks to be recharged, which has reduced the risk of drought over the next summer quite considerably. So we've had taken into account, obviously, we have seen some properties flooding, as we just sort of mentioned, but overall, we've seen the sort of the rainfall that's enabled the stocks to be recharged without too many flooding issues. Okay, so while that's been lined up, I'll just explain what I'm going to talk about today. So when I came previously, the first time I came to talk to this committee, I talked about, in general, the sort of type of work that we do in terms of maintenance, capital programme investment, resilience measures, and some of the sort of the 2100 plus strategy schemes. Today I'm going to focus on the investment programme, which was previously called as a capital programme. So this is the sort of the largest schemes which we gain funding for across Lincolnshire and wide across Lincs and Northants area. So, Joe, have you got the pack ready? Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, we're just waiting.
That's all right. I'll carry on anyway for the time being. So, this is money we apply for through what's known as Flood Defence Grant in Aid, and this is over the next 10 years, well, from 2024 to 2036. This represents an investment by the government of around about £10.5 billion. So this is how we again are intending to apply for funds out of this fund going forward, what the policy is going forward as well. So we've so it's actually a new policy commencing on the 1st of April around this funding. I'm going to go into a little bit about what that means, what the new funding policy is, and what the requirements are around that. Just reflect a little bit on the previous policy and what that's meant for Lincolnshire as well. So I think we're nearly there, maybe.
I think we could be there. More.
Right.
I think we're just waiting for Joseph to give us the nod. But it took much longer. You might have run out of words to tell us.
No, that's good. Okay.
Oh, we got Joseph.
Okay,
Yeah,
we'll go on to the next slide anyway. So we've got a new funding policy that comes into effect on the 1st of April. So when the new government came into power nearly a couple of years ago, announced a review of the funding policy for investing in flood defences. There was extensive consultation, and that culminated in this policy being introduced or being announced last autumn. And it comes into effect on the 1st of April this year. So any sort of schemes that both the Environment Agency and other risk management authorities, so the lead local flood authority, yourselves, the county council, IDBs and others can apply for funds from this as a result of this policy. If we go on to the next one, please. Okay, so it's just worthwhile reflecting that the existing policy has had a number of benefits, and since 2011 it's enabled over sort of £10 million of investment across the country, and that's better protected over 700,000 properties, as we can see there. But it's recognised that this has been in place since 2011, and there's some reasons for changing to a new policy. If you look on sort of the left-hand box there, it's quite an outdated and inefficient sort of funding model. It's been in place, as I said, since 2011. It's quite costly. It's quite complex for organisations to apply into. It's quite a complex funding process. It was involved a complex calculator that established the percentage of that established the percentage of money that the government would apply to schemes versus, the amount that would be required through partnership funding. Quite often, project costs were also underestimated, and we saw a lot of sort of like project cost increases as we went through. Again, on the sort of the right-hand box there, we need to reflect that we've got quite an ageing flood defence portfolio, and traditionally refurbishment and replacement of assets were underfunded. It kind of favoured new flood defences as opposed to refurbishing existing ones. And the bottom left also recognised that things like natural flood management and sustainable urban drainage systems, NFM and SUDS, were undervalued in that existing policy, mostly because it was very hard to quantify the benefits that were gained from doing these schemes. So, for example, if you plant a hectare of woodland, it was very difficult to understand from that or prove exactly what the flood risk benefit would be. People kind of know that it makes sense and it will have a benefit, but it was very hard to quantify that in actual terms of number of properties that it might protect from flooding. So the new policy looks to make that a lot simpler. And we talked about resilience measures. Chris just mentioned resilience measures as well. Individual property protection, again, they struggle to attract funding, and the new policy aims to, help in that respect. There were some other sort of strategic reasons as well. Reports from the National Audit Office called for better sort of national planning of flood risk management investment, and the project development's often very quite slow and expensive. So there was good reasons for change. I'll be going to the next one, please. So just to simplify the new part of the policy. So in terms of refurbishing existing flood defences or flood risk assets, for refurbishing, they will now receive 100% of the costs of refurbishment, as opposed to going through this complex sort of partnership funding sort of calculator. For new or improved projects, so that's increasing the standard of protection, they will get 100% funding for the first 3 million, and anything above 3 million, they will get 90% of the funds, so they will require 10% partnership funding above £3 million for new flood defences. Aiming to simplify the prioritisation on that, because obviously if you take the funding eligibility, it's on the left-hand side of it, there is a finite amount of money, so schemes will have to be prioritised, and that's going to be more simplified to more simple benefit cost ratios. So it's basically value for money. If communities or local authorities or businesses decide to add money towards a scheme, then that will increase that value for taxpayers' money, and the prioritisation can potentially be improved. The strategic objectives, if you go on to the next slide, I've outlined those a little bit more on there. So the strategic objectives, which the policy is hoping to achieve. So the first one is around deprived communities and making sure that they receive a proportionate share of the funding that's available. We recognise, or the government recognises, that the more deprived a community might be, the harder it is for them to get back on their feet after flooding. And we've seen that after flooding, many sort of the more deprived communities perhaps don't have flood risk insurance or house insurance. It's very difficult for them to get back on their feet. So the policy recognises that. So a minimum of 20% of the funds will go to the sort of the most deprived fifth of communities, and again, a minimum of 40% will go to the lowest or the most deprived 40% of communities. Again, as I just mentioned, the government want the investment to go further, so any contributions will boost the project's prioritisation. And natural flood management is going to play a bigger part of the new policy. So 3% of the investment over the next 10 years, or at least 3%, which represents around about £300 million, will go to natural flood management over the 10 years. And that will be open to other groups as well to apply for that. So conservation bodies, perhaps community groups, potentially individual landowners may be able to apply for funding, whereas previously it's sort of ring-fenced to risk management authorities. So, and potentially will be a simpler process to apply for that going forward. We go on to the next one, please, Joe. So just to reflect over the last sort of 10 years that, you know, there has been quite a lot of investment across Lincolnshire, and you can see some of the typical sort of schemes there that we've got there. So we've got the sort of the coastal works which we do on an annual basis. I think we've got around about £10 million for that work again this year. So that's placing sand on the east coast, which helps to protect the flood risk assets, or the flood defences along the coast there. So it takes out the wave energy. When there's a storm in the North Sea and the waves come crashing on the shoreline, that helps to take the energy out of the waves, so that they don't damage the flood defences. We've got ongoing works at Grand Sluice in Boston in the middle there, the one that's sort of the photograph taken at night. We've got we've completed works in Lincoln itself, both throughout the town and to the washlands, which help protect around about 6,000 houses, 700 business in Lincoln itself. So some extensive work done there in the last few years. We've got the Boston Barrier, which was complete a few years ago. The works of the barrier protects around 14,000 properties in Boston. And we've got the reservoirs, bottom right, sort of Louth and Horncastle, which were complete a few years ago. So that's just a sort of snapshot of some of the funding that's previously been sort of through sort of capital investment programme funding. If you go on to the next one, please. This is sorry, it's come out a bit light, the sort of the Lincolnshire part of this, but this is just to reflect that across this is the Anglian North RFCC area and the different councils that make up that area. And you can see on the left there sort of the tallest sort of bar graph that we've attracted over the last sort of 10 years, 2015 to 2025, around about £200 million worth of investment across the Lincolnshire area. That translates into around about 31,000 properties better protected. Go on to the next one, please, Joe. So this is just, we'll just nip through these quickly. So these are some of the projects on the investment programme at the moment. So this one's what we're calling the lower risk debris schemes. It's a bit of a strange title, I know, but debris schemes are actually really important. That's the Anglian North RFCC area, so we can see a number of those improvements across Lincolnshire itself. Total project costs around about £13 million. Very important for protecting communities. It keeps debris away from sort of restricted areas like culverts and pumping stations. You're better off catching a fridge freezer or an old sofa on a screen rather than getting blocked in a culvert. So very important sort of structures. They need to be designed properly, maintained properly, to protect communities. You go on to the next one, please. This is a project we're currently looking to progress. Currently finalising the business case for this. So we'll present a potential project cost around about £10 million. And this is to renew the flood risk assets through Sleaford. We've got several ageing assets in Sleaford. We've got which do take quite a lot of maintenance. They've got lots of moving parts. There's sort of like tilting gates, things that open and close. We'd like to make the system a lot more passive, requiring a lot less intervention. So we're working on that at the moment. If you go to the next one, the maxi cut again. Looking to start in May 27. Again, a considerable investment to better protect 678 properties, and that is to refurbish the embankments on the sort of the maxi cut channel towards the south of the county. We go on to the next one. Again, this is something which has just started over the last year or so, and these are improvements to the lower Witham embankments together with the Grand Sluice work. So quite a considerable investment there, anything up to £60 million, and going to protect around about sort of 1,400 homes in that along the lower Witham. Lower Witham runs from Lincoln to Boston. You can imagine there's sort of miles of embankments there. We've had to prioritise those embankments to where we will get the most value for money in terms of reducing flood risk to properties. There may be some areas, well, there will be some areas where we have seen problems in the past, where there are fewer properties where we're unable to carry out works on those embankments. So if you want to move to the next one. Gibraltar Point to Freeston Shore, so these are some of our coastal embankments between Boston and Gibraltar Point. So again, they're looking to repair some of those assets over the next few years. Again, around about 1,600 properties will be better protected. The next one might be the last one, I'm not sure. Yeah, that's the last one. So that was just a flavour of some of the sort of types of work that we can attract towards this sort of funding going forward. As I've said, it's not just funding for ourselves, it's funding for other risk management authorities and others. And just over the next year, the investment programme across the Anglia North RFCC area is around about £109 million, of which 89 is the Environment Agency's allocation, and around about £20 million to other risk management authorities, so IDBs and others. So that concludes the presentation. Chairman, happy to take some questions on the investment programme.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Morgan. Do we have any questions for Morgan, please? Councillor Reeve.
Thank you. Thank you for that report. I really welcome new approach to the funding, the way it's going to be looked at and the way it's going to be available to different organisations and landowners and the likes. I see that there's been approximately 10 billion spent since 2011, protecting 700,000 plus homes. Has money, I mean, said there's a finite amount, obviously there's a finite amount, but has there been any limits put on it, or has there been any money ring-fenced by a central government to say, well, you've got at least X amount, or is it just on an ongoing basis? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So over the next 10 years, so looking ahead as part of the the government's sort of wider infrastructure investment programme, so I think it's £10.5 billion has been allocated towards this kind of investment programme going forward. And that was allocated from 2024 to 2036 is the intention.
So that's actually a very similar level of funding then, as opposed to an increase in level of funding, but it's going to be distributed differently. Is that roughly right? Yeah. So as mentioned in the presentation, there's a slight different emphasis on the new programme. So recognising a lot of the consultation that was received by the government was around that sort of shifting of money from, towards more maintaining what we've got as a preference to building sort of brand new schemes. So that was the intention, or that was a lot of the feedback that the government received, and that's the intention of the new policy. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about the most deprived areas. Can you confirm that by deprived, we're talking mostly about financially or the indices of multiple deprivation?
Yeah.
And if so, is that necessarily a good idea for 20%? 20% of people who are at risk from flooding, does it correlate to a significant number of people who live in those areas of multiple deprivation? And in Lincolnshire, I would guess that a lot of those areas would either be in the city or the town centres or on the east coast. Does that correlate with where the flooding is most likely to happen?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit too early to say how that could be applied to Lincolnshire in particular. But I think those areas you stated are probably the most likely areas which will be, potentially impacted by that part of the policy. So going forward, we will be required to put forward schemes, and there will be sort of a national investment steer which will sort of recommend areas which will be, potentially benefit from funding. We'll put that together with local knowledge and discussions with partners going forward. We'll put that forward to the national team that look at the future investment pipeline. They'll see if that correlates to the policy, and then funding will be allocated accordingly. So there's more guidance expected on the exact process, but that's generally how it will work going forward.
Okay, thanks. On some of the specific schemes, I think, what did you call it, the filter, the drainage,
the debris schemes.
the debris schemes, if I remember rightly, it said that there were something like £13 million and protecting 250 properties or more. Can you elaborate on what those schemes are doing other than just for 250 properties? Because it sounds expensive per property, but I would guess that there's another impact in terms of not flooding loads of farmers' fields and so on.
That's right. I mean, when we carry out these schemes, there's obviously a lot wider benefit to, and it doesn't just apply to the debris schemes, it applies to many other schemes as well. The previous policies, a lot of the metrics were around the properties protected. Increasingly, we'll be looking at value for money, so sort of cost-benefit ratio. So going forward, a lot of the new, I think we're looking for something like about an 8-to-1 cost-benefit ratio. So compared to a lot of other sort of government sort of programs, there's actually quite a lot of benefit to flood risk management schemes. So I don't know the figures exactly for the debris schemes, but I should imagine that it was quite sort of a healthy sort of cost-benefit ratio for doing that sort of work. And sort of don't forget, once the once a culvert gets blocked with potential sort of debris, is quite an expensive operation to unblock it. It might even involve sort of digging down from above as well. So and sort of cofferdams and that sort of thing. So there is quite a lot of work goes into sort of understanding. Quite a lot of science actually goes into sort of understanding where debris screens will have the biggest sort of impact. You can analyse what the potential for debris is that might go into the watercourse in that location, goes into sort of the design of the screens. They've got to be, safe to work on, and they can be inherently very, very sort of dangerous structures as well to work on and clear debris. So quite a lot goes into the design of them.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carrington.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Morgan, for the report. There is no system which cannot be improved, and it's always right that we have a look at how money is disposed of. A couple of points that I wanted to make, Chairman, and one has already been touched on by Councillor Baxter. On our national priorities, looking at this issue of deprived communities. Now, nobody would say that deprived communities should not be addressed, and certainly if that is to be an important criterion, we can think in Lincolnshire, for example, Boston, which has recently suffered significant flooding problems, the downtown areas of the city, and certain of our coastal towns could positively benefit. But the fundamentals of Lincolnshire are that we are primarily a rural county, and areas of deprivation tend to be concentrated in urban parts of the world. We have some urban parts of the world, but bluntly not that many. And I am concerned that this may, as a national criterion, it's no blame attaches to Morgan or our local Environment Agency colleagues, but that the national criteria may direct monies overall away from a rural area like Lincolnshire and focus it in bigger urban centres, and we won't get that benefit. And I hope, Morgan has rightly said, this is very early days. We're about to, we're not quite in month one yet, but I hope that the fit between this criteria and how it affects where money is directed, and how between that and our physical needs in terms of where flood risk challenges exist here in Lincolnshire can be very closely monitored, obviously by Morgan, by our own officers, and Chairman, by this committee, just to see how that one pans out going forward. I hope I'm worrying about nothing. I have a feeling that I'm not, and I don't want our county to be deprived. And just a second point for Morgan on that one, I absolutely understand that cost benefit and value for money come into these things, but crucial in this, and this is something that was said repeatedly in the last council, the criteria that we use for assessing cost benefit analysis rightly focus on how many homes protected, and that's something that you've said in your presentation, but they seem to many of us to undervalue agricultural land and to use agricultural land almost as a kind of reserve swashway, an area that can flood to take off the pressure, but without any formal system behind that, without adequate means of compensating farmers. So I still have concerns about the criteria which are being used to assess value for money, although of course value for money in itself is a good thing. Thank you, Chair.
Would you like to respond to them 2 points?
Yes, thanks, Councillor. So one change to the new system is around how that sort of value for money will be sort of calculated. So under the old system, under the complex sort of partnership funding calculator, it valued the benefits from agriculture and businesses differently to homes. So with homes under the previous system, around about, you got a return of around about 50p in the pound per benefits, and for agricultural areas and businesses, you've got something about 5p in the pound. Well, under the new system, it's going to be, the benefits of the benefits wherever they're valued. So we're waiting to see how that sort of plays out with agricultural areas. But potentially, they will be valued on their sort of true worth, if you like, as well with sort of other sort of critical infrastructure as well. It's important to note, that there's different businesses, different sort of critical infrastructure, sort of roads, railways. They all sort of come into the sort of the calculation as well. Also wider on sort of recognising that particularly the Fens area as well. We've got the Fens 2100 plus strategy, which actually we're looking to publish some of the initial documents next week. We had a parliamentary reception last week where sort of Sir John Hayes gave a sort of an overview of or hosted a sort of parliamentary reception where some of that work was presented. So it's sort of explaining for these lowland areas there is great sort of benefit to the country as a whole through agriculture and potential growth in these areas. And so that's kind of kick-starting that work. We've got lots of evidence. We're presenting the case for change, if you like, over the next week or so when that's published. And then that will prompt kind of a sort of a 10-year sort of action plan, part of which is looking at carrying out almost like a strategic outline case. So that's the initial sort of kind of business case for working on assets over the next sort of 10 years in the Fenland areas. So again, early days, waiting to see how the policy sort of is applied to these areas. But as I say, we will just see how that develops over the next few years.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sneath.
Thank you, Chairman. Just touching on a bit further from Councillor Baxter and Councillor Carrington. Problem with going third, they kind of nick all your good questions. But a bit of contradiction. You said that additional weight and priority would be given to part-funded projects. But how will this approach ensure that vital projects that are not funded in deprived areas are given equal priority? Thank you.
Yeah, it's you know, it doesn't necessarily discount more deprived areas, because you know the source of the funding isn't sort of discounted as well. So it might be possible for things like potential to match up with things like, you know, different sort of growth funds, as an example, could be matched. So it doesn't stipulate that the partnership funding has to be private funding. It can be other sources of public funding, whether that's other parts of the government, local authorities, you know, investment funds, that sort of thing. So again, yeah, I completely understand sort of sentiment around the question, but I think it's something we're going to have to sort of see how it materialises over the next few years.
Thank you, Morgan. Do we have any more questions for Morgan? No? Right, thank you very much. Thank you, Morgan. Right, well, thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion on this item. I'd like to propose that we have reviewed and are satisfied with the detailed performance contained within the reports and the presentation, and that officers be thanked for the presentation. Can you raise your hands if you agree, please? Thank you, that is agreed. Item 6, Street Design Code. This item is found on pages 13 to 88 of the agenda pack. This report will be introduced by Justine Robson, Senior Department Manager Officer, Warren Peppard, Head of Development Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I do have a presentation lined up to show you some visuals. Obviously, the bulk of the updates is within the report, so I won't labour over the contents of that, but wanted to support what was in there with these
Justine,
visuals.
sorry, can you just be a bit more vigilant about your mouthpiece, because it does, through the loop, it might not come up. Thank you.
Apologies, is that better? So the Better Streets for Lincolnshire project has advanced since September 2024, with officer workshops and stakeholder input leading to a first draft. This was based on the Surrey structure, but has been adapted for Lincolnshire's highways, drainage, flood risk and maintenance needs. The code will bring all existing design, street, drainage and adoption guidance into a single resource, supported by a simple web-based checklist to streamline submissions and improve our response times. And the next stage in this project is to test the code across different development types, with a further update to follow once this is complete. Obviously, high-level policy ambitions don't automatically translate into the day-to-day design decisions of developments. Planners, transport planners, developers and engineers will all approach schemes through a different lens, and real-world constraints often result in business-as-usual cookie-cutter type developments and outcomes. To make strategy effective, we need to do some more upfront innovative thinking, translated into clear, adoptable design expectations, which this website hopes to do. Could provide the next slide, please. So we started working with Create Streets. They were commissioned approximately 40 weeks ago, and this is the phase we're currently at, with an issue of the draft Part A, which is appended to this report. The issue of draft Part B will be sent through either tomorrow or next week, and Part C content is already complete. We will then enter the review period, which will undergo further workshops with LPAs, consultants, developers and internal teams within LCC. We'll agree any changes that are needed to be made and update the code, and then we'll have a final draft submission end of June. Next slide, please. So this is a visual of how we are currently looking on the website. The website is being developed by Energy Cell, who have undertaken developing websites for Lincolnshire County Council before, so are very au fait with our requirements as a local authority. We have 3 parts structured here. Part A being planning better streets. This will predominantly be used at pre-application, early concept stage, such as outline. And this will shape the master planning and the movement hierarchy, the street typologies and the flood risk principles of a development, ensuring that applicants get things right before they get to the detailed design stage. Part B, designing better streets, will be applied during planning applications, either full or reserved matters. These will provide measurable visual parameters for layout, street types, drainage, parking, trees, crossings, character and utilities, as well as the material use. And it will give officers and developers a shared consistent reference points to have those iterative consultations. Part C, constructing better streets, applies post-permission and is our Section 38 process, both technical approval and adoption. It sets out the construction standards, the materials, the drainage verification, maintenance responsibilities, and ensures that what gets built is adoptable, safe, resilient and maintainable. The code will be supported by clear visual examples of best practice. Create Streets do have a library of sites across the UK with their previous work, but we are currently collating Lincolnshire-based photographs, which will be supplemented by the wider UK images where needed to demonstrate what good street design looks like, particularly for walk-in, street hierarchy, surface water management and tree-lined streets. And these visuals will strengthen clarity for applicants and support our decision-making. As you can see there, I think two out of 3 of those photos are Lincolnshire based at the moment. Next slide, please. Going further into the website, Part C, as I said, the content is complete. That already exists on our LCC website as our detailed design and covers content that was in our design approach, our drainage guidance and our adoption processes. By bringing all this together in one place on the Better Streets for Lincolnshire website, it creates a single, intuitive, end-to-end resource for both planning and Section 38. And this directly responds to stakeholder feedback asking for clearer expectations and fewer iterative requests. Developers repeatedly ask for certainty in a process, and by consolidating the guidance and setting out requirements in one place, this reduces delay, negotiation and reinterpretation of standards from one scheme to the next. Next slide, please. To streamline submissions, we are producing web-based checklists. We currently have showing here the Section 38 submission form, which is what we would expect developers to provide when they submit their development. But we will introduce further checklists from concept master planning through to the technical approval. Again, this will reduce delay and make officer responses faster and more consistent. Where the code is introduced, the code will be clear, usable and bold in that it adopts a must, should, can hierarchy throughout, which removes ambiguity. It will be usable in that the web-based code includes adaptive checklists within the planning process and helps applicants submit complete information first time. And it will be bold in that it aligns with national best practice alongside local priorities and our adoption criteria, focusing effort where we know it delivers the greatest value. Next slide, please. So this is a template page of what the coded elements of the website will be for Part A and Part B. It's currently showing red, amber, green there, but we have decided to change that to a gradient colour to show hierarchy rather than the RAG ratings. Technical diagrams will sit alongside real photos to help applicants understand both the parameters and the outcomes that we expect. This covers movement, drainage, landscaping, utilities, placemaking. We'll also make use of annotating these with green ticks for showing our expectations, and red crosses will be used on images where the designers missed the mark. Those images are also expandable, so if you're out on site on a phone or a tablet, they can increase the size of those to look at those directly. The code is purposely bold on a smaller number of critical elements rather than a vast unwielding code with little practical impact. And this increases achievability, improves compliance and supports the levelling up ambition of clearer and more consistent standards across districts. And I just wanted to end that it's important to remember that as a local highway authority we are stewards of places, and so the code does embed buildability, serviceability, long-term stewardship, and also ensures that streets are not just permitted but they're safe, maintainable and resilient over the next 40 to 60 years. That concludes the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Lovely, thank you, Justine. Do we have any questions? Councillor Sneath.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I feel this project shows significant progress and will give Lincolnshire a modern, consistent and locally tailored approach to street design. My only concern is, are district councils prepared to integrate this into their local plans and develop control processes?
Thank you for your question. Early conversations with local district councils were covered using this as a supplementary planning document. Timelines made that unable at this specific point, given that South Kesteven are currently undergoing their draft local plan. Central Links are also going through their local plan change amendments. So at the moment this will be used as a material consideration document in much the same way our current guidance does. It allows us to influence those decision making, and with the close working relationship we've garnered, particularly with South Kesteven, who are close to finalising their draft, we're ensuring that there's no conflicts between what their code stipulates and what our code requests. Ultimately, once we've finalised the website and it's all signed off, we can revisit those conversations and have those placed as SPDs for the LPAs to make that, yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Reeve.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your report. In the same way that neighbourhood development plans give neighbourhoods quite a big influence on what can happen in their areas, I just wonder if any of this will be made a mockery of the fact that there's no, because it's a street plan, does any of this come into the fact that Lincolnshire could be blighted by pylons, wind turbines, solar panels? We're looking to maintain the sort of nature of Lincolnshire as it is, but potentially without this being included in a bigger picture, can these sort of aspects that we're trying to maintain the aspect of Lincolnshire as it is be used if Lincolnshire is then consulted in NSIP proposals, whereby you've got the most fantastic design little community, but it's going to be surrounded by solar panels and wind turbines and pylons and the like? So can any of what you've just presented from the street point of view say, well, no, we've put all this effort into doing this nicely, we don't want central government overruling us with an NSIP and surround us by all these unsightly aspects? Are they completely separate, or can they be intertwined in any way?
Councillor Baxter, thank you, but can we allow Justine to answer, please?
The Better Streets for Lincolnshire website is predominantly for residential developments. Decisions made regards NSIP, those sit within our team in the fact that we would respond as a local highway authority. They just sit separately to the code. Obviously any consultations we have would be based on a site-by-site basis, and I don't know if you have anything further to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, like Justine said, the code is predominantly for the sort of residential developments that we deal with and the sort of placemaking design. I think that where the code will help in relation to highway impact of NSIP applications, obviously the front end stuff around the requirements of what we expect developers to submit through things like transport assessments and probably the back end of the code when we're looking at highway mitigation and improvement works and construction management plans, it will guide those type of things. But in relation to the visual impact or the amenity impact which these NSIP developments put on places, then no, it is two separate things.
Thank you, but it wasn't entirely a stupid question.
Thank you. Councillor Carrington.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. And Justine, thank you very much for the report. This matter first came before the old Environment and Economy Committee in the last council when I sat in that chair. I think at the beginning of the project it was Becky Mellish who was dealing with it. I was delighted at the promise then, and I have to say I'm absolutely delighted to see what we have on the agenda today in terms of the draft. It's tremendously good work. And can I, before coming on to the actual document, just give a shout out to planning liaison officers within the highways team. All of us in this room who are elected members deal an awful lot with highways, and we deal with our own highways officers, our area highways managers, on things like potholes and road repairs and pavement improvements. Most members will never see or meet planning liaison officers. I'm actually a public service planner in another part of my life, and I work with them on a daily basis, literally on a daily basis. The work that they do in terms of enabling the improvement of the built environment with new development is absolutely vital, not just in terms of highway design, footways, safe transport, that kind of thing, but also in terms of their expertise with lead local flood authority and dealing with flood risk. If I was going to be cheeky and I was still sitting in that chair, I'd say it might be nice to get them in and have a presentation, because what they do is enormously important to the subject of this committee. So I'm pleased to pay tribute to them in this public area. A couple of specifics about what we have before us. I'm absolutely delighted to see right at the top of your introductory document the fact that this is going to be tested. I know of examples in the production of local plans, for example, by local planning authorities, where those who have produced the plans have not gone and tested things. They've not road tested them. Oh no, that's not necessary, they've said. We know what we're doing. And the minute you then apply that to a real major planning application, you can suddenly discover problems. So the idea of road testing this against actual schemes, I think, is an enormously positive one. Another point, the document refers to the design and placemaking planning practice guidance, and rightly so. Can I just also make reference to the National Design Guide, the NDG, which is underused, which has, by ministerial fiat, the same weight as the Planning Policy Framework, National Planning Policy Framework we are all familiar with, both in terms of its content and its underlying principles. I think it's very relevant to what we have here. And what we have here is absolutely excellent. If I was going to be a little bit picky, I might say that 33 golden rules is an awful lot of golden rules, but I absolutely understand that effectively this is a checklist. Similarly, in terms of layout, this is purely a presentational point. The document we have before us in draft is in portrait. I just wonder, when you have complex thematics to get across, principles, but also a lot of fine detail, whether you might literally be giving yourselves a bit more space to present these things clearly in a landscape rather than a portrait format, as the NDG does. But the bottom line, Chairman, is that planning is about building better places. You could argue that's exactly what local government is about in totality. What I think this does is give planners, and going back to the question raised by Councillor Sneath, let me assure you as a planner, this gives me a beeping big hammer to use when I do the big housing developments that I do to make those developments better. It will be used. In time, of course, it can be built into local plans, but the fact that it is, as Justine says, a material planning consideration now really gives me and planning officers all over Lincolnshire serious heft in trying to make sure that these important new developments, be they big or small, are better. So I look forward to seeing this development. I hope it will come back to us with the lessons that are learnt and come out of the road testing programme. Look forward to seeing it develop. But a big, big thank you to all the team who've worked so hard on this. It really is a genuinely useful document. Thank you, Chairman.
Did you want to come back, Justine?
I just wanted to thank you for your comments. It's nice to have the support from someone who understands from the planning side of things how this will benefit Lincolnshire County Council as local highway authority and lead local authority. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Woods.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to also follow up on district councils as well. I'm a little bit concerned on the enforcement side of things because, you know, similar to, you know, rules and the codes that you find on with planning on these estates, these new build estates, the enforcement seems very weak from district council side of things. In my area, I have a lot of planning complaints about, you know, developers and their plans, which have gone against, like I say, existing rules, and that are similar to those found in this you know, streets design code. And from what the complainants, you know, are telling me, the district councils, they're not helpful, and district councillors they seem disinterested. So what enforcement what enforcement how do you enforce this code upon developers who, you know, are putting in plans that go against this code? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So this code can be referred to throughout the process, from pre-application right through to adoption. Having the code in place at the beginning will allow consultants and developers to make those design considerations early doors, understanding what it is as a local highway authority and lead local flood authority we would expect to see. And those various touch points throughout that process, through pre-app conversations, during the planning process, at consultations, at design panel meetings, and threading through right to when it comes to technical approval and adoption. At that point, we do have more weight in the game in that as an adopting authority, they need to meet the technical design standards that we expect to see in order to be an adopted development. We would send out our inspectors on site who will review those standards, carry out testing, and ensure that everything aligns with the plans that have been provided. Ultimately, if a developer wants that site to be adopted, then they need to make sure that they're meeting all the expectations that were set out clearly at technical approval. And hopefully, as there's a resource, this resource will allow, by the time they get to that point, all the conversations will have been had previously that may have caused a hiccup. This also sits alongside the fact that we ask for things such as construction management plans, that we need to review and approve both at planning and at Section 38 technical approval. So things that we tend to get a lot of comments on, mud on the road, etc. Those types of elements will still be as part of the process, and we'll have those conversations as and when they come up.
Thanks. So, sort of the next question. I'm not well versed in I'm not literate when it comes to planning. So is this just an initial code, you know, that you sort of approve with developers, or is it ongoing right from start to finish, and you enforce the code throughout the whole entire process? Because, you know, as we all know, plans can change midway through building processes, or, you know, the plans change because they just want to do something different. That's happened in my patch with new build estates. The original plans, you know, they just change halfway through. They don't want to put a public open space or a green space anymore somewhere, and you know, they try and manoeuvre their way around it, maybe to get a few more plots, you know, things like that happen. So is the enforcement process carried out all the way through?
So the code, it's been written in such a way that obviously there'll be strong design considerations, but it does give flexibility for innovation in those conversations. Getting the baseline right, which is what we've placed in Part A about ground conditions, which tend to affect the design later on when they've maybe delayed doing those ground investigations. And by the time they've done them, it means that a design may need to be amended. By having it in the code that we expect to see that at outline and master planning, that already means that there's going to be less iterative design changes as that goes on. Also, having this code there as a material consideration, both for ourselves and for the LPAs, it means that if they do want to amend something such as public open space, they can refer to our code and ask where they're meeting that code and how they justify departing from that. So in many ways it will support the LPAs to make their determinations as well.
That's great, thank you very much.
Thank you again. Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report, Justin. I'm here. If a new estate is programmed to be built, how many of your 33 golden rules do we expect to be adhered to in the planning of that estate? That's my first question. And my second question, is there enough allocation made for car parking? I live in a town called Sleaford. I think most houses have 2 or 3 cars. We have most probably one of the biggest car parks in Lincolnshire, but it's still not enough car parking on the estates where people live. Is this being accounted for in this new code? Thank you.
Thank you. So in regards to your first question, we would expect to see that they have attempted to meet all 33 golden rules, and where they haven't, they provide justification as to why that is the case. Larger developments should be able to comfortably achieve all 33. Smaller developments, maybe of 10 dwellings, may find that more difficult, but that's where we get that innovation and thinking, and by having those golden rules there, they can at least aim for something to achieve that. But again, we'd have those conversations and get that justification as to why they haven't been able to achieve it in that instance. With regards to car parking, it is up to the local planning authorities to make those quantums with regards to how many spaces should be provided on a development. And so certain local plans will have those quantums within them as well, and wherever they are provided, that's what we would defer to in the first instance. Our code allows for developers to think more innovatively about how that parking is provided on site. So it's not just a case of frontage parking, they can consider parking bays, parking barns, parking yards, and being provided up front, the kind of parking that the local authority would be happy to see would allow those design considerations early doors to make sure there is sufficient parking. Obviously it's a site-by-site basis. Different areas are going to require different parking. Living in Sleaford, yes, 2 or 3 cars are probably going to be needed per 3-bedroom dwelling. Inside city centre Lincoln, perhaps not as many, but there would be the considerations that we give as a local highway authority as to whether it would affect the highway safety. And again, this code allows the local planning authority to weigh up those options that are being provided on a development-to-development basis. Does that answer the question?
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair.
In Grantham, we have a development which is a third finished. It's a 1,800 house development, and they've built roughly a third of the houses on there, and they're just looking at moving forward and putting an extra 900 or so in. And one of the obvious things for me is that several of the third that's complete, the design of that area is really poor, like connectivity-wise, and just the general design of that area is not good. The new side of the development has obviously been in the mix for several years, at least 5, 6 years going back of design. So I'm wondering, would they have had foresight of this kind of code changes knowing it's coming up? If this was, say, implemented in, I don't know, it says here end of June draft submission, if something's already been in design for several years, are we going to ask the developers to go back to the drawing board and redesign those areas based on the new code, or is this already kind of in place? I'm just wondering what the impact's going to be on things that have been there for many, many years. I mean, we've had speculative projects pop up, and it's been clear that the design of these things has been around for some time. I'm just wondering what impact it's going to have on say, a development that's pretty much just about to go into process now, the application process. And are these now going to be delayed whilst they try to rework the projects? I'm just wondering, as I say, what stage a current development would have to be put on hold? I hope that makes sense.
Thank you for your question. It would be difficult to apply the code retrospectively to planning developments that already have received approval and have their approved layouts. Somewhere in, I'm assuming, is it Poplar Farm? That kind of, yeah, they would be undergoing obviously the Section 38 technical approval. If there's areas where they can achieve meeting the code without having to make any Section 73 amendments to their plan application, then obviously our officers will attempt to do so. It's worth noting that although this resource is fairly new, a lot of our feedback during planning consultations will have been based on National Guidance Manual for Streets, LTM 120, Inclusive Mobility. So we will have had those verbal conversations that maybe were not necessarily recognised within our publications at the time. So in many ways, this resource is now tying into what we've been trying to get from a design throughout the past few years, which is why you may see a difference between the current phase as opposed to older phases. But yes, it would be very difficult to retrospectively apply this now.
Is that it from you, Councillor Martin? Yeah. Councillor Reeve.
Thank you. First part's mainly just a comment. This must be quite an expensive process. This takes up 3/4 of the meeting notes that we've got today. But I note at the beginning of your presentation, you said it's based on the Surrey design. Hopefully they've not charged us for using their design, which I'm guessing was also based on a Dutch design, because part of the presentation appeared to be in Dutch. I think it was the second slide, the top part of the second slide, each ABC was in Dutch. I'm just guessing, but anyway, I'm pleased to say it probably hasn't cost as much as I think it may be cost. The second part would be that in the plan, there's a move away from cul-de-sacs in modern design to more of a grid sort of pattern. I particularly like cul-de-sacs. It prevents vehicles taking shortcuts and rat runs and being able to get up too much speed. And providing the cul-de-sacs have got pedestrian access from one area to another, could you explain what is the issue with cul-de-sacs in modern design? Thank you.
You've perfectly said it in your question that we're not necessarily aiming for the prevention of cul-de-sacs and allowing through traffic for vehicles, but it's giving that consideration that we make connections for people to make travel choices such as walking and cycling. So in those instances where they're wanting to provide cul-de-sacs or turning heads, it's not necessarily a case of that we would defer them from that. But equally, there is other options such as edge lanes, which would reduce the use of cars coming through to solely those people that live along that street, because it won't be a desirable route for people to take. Or we can introduce the turning heads with modal filters that allow pedestrians and cyclists to make that direct route, but means that, again, car users won't want to make that journey. So it's not a complete step away from the cul-de-sac, but it's rethinking how those are provided.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Brilliant report. I think it's really well thought out, actually. My question was also about cul-de-sacs. It does say in the report, avoiding all but exceptional circumstances. So maybe that can be reworded, because exceptional basically says you don't want them in there. But yeah, similar points made. I found that areas which have cul-de-sacs are very community-based, and they also encourage developers to put a lot more parking on property, rather than parking on the road. They're safer for children to play around. You get less bad parking. Speeding is less of an issue as well. So I do think cul-de-sacs shouldn't be avoided, as it's been put in this statement here. But if there is a really good reason why cul-de-sacs should be avoided, I think that should be put in there. But I don't think you should prioritise cyclists, personally.
Happy to revisit the wording and make sure that it is clear what we're attempting to do. When we envision cul-de-sacs, it's that enclosure of the houses around the street, but it's about making that street design, like I say, a family-friendly, community-focused area that isn't car-dominated and that allows say a child from one area of the development to walk across and meet their friend at another area of the development, rather than without having to go, excuse upon, around the houses. So yeah, I'm happy to revisit that. There's also many other ways that we can make streets playable and community focused. A lot of the street typologies that we're looking at focus on reducing those speeds. So by narrowing the roads or providing material use that makes it feel like you want to drive slower, achieves those playable areas in much the same way as a cul-de-sac would do.
Would you say that people who obviously have to live on these type of developments, rabbit warrens, I would call them, or ant nests, or whatever you want to call them, do you find that they would rather live in a grid system, or would you find that they would rather live in a cul-de-sac system? Because if I had a family and I was to choose to live in an area like that, if I could, obviously, let's face it, they're being built because they're more affordable houses, aren't they? And you can cram as many of them on a small piece of land as possible. Would people who buying these houses, would they rather want a grid system, or would they rather want the cul-de-sac system? Has there been any sort of surveys been done from this?
I think it's ultimately trying to give people a choice as to where they would like to live. Historically, in many of our town centres, the grid system is there, and people move into those houses, and they've made that choice that's what works for them. Equally, some newer developments have some grid systems, and people have chosen to move in there. So this code, it doesn't remove that choice. It just means that obviously design considerations are given, that they're not solely focused on one type of buyer.
If I could just come in there as well. Again, I think I've used the analogy in previous scrutiny committees. I think we'll certainly look at the terminology, because I think when people read cul-de-sacs, you know, the interpretation is dead ends surrounded by properties, you know, the Brookside type of estate that we used to see being built through the 80s. And again, I think terminology is going to be quite important, because what we're trying to create is we're trying to create obviously better places for people to live and for people to dwell. We also need to keep our eye on enabling movement through the estates. And again, I think what we're trying to achieve is not a free-for-all sort of motor-propelled movement of vehicles anywhere they want to go. This is more about the movement of people, isn't it? And creating those different design solutions for it. So I think we will end up with cul-de-sac type layouts, but they won't look like cul-de-sacs, so you probably won't think you're living on a cul-de-sac. So you'll be able to access your property in your car, but move around the estate in other means. So again, I think we try through good design to try and minimise, you know, me driving past your house to get to that shop, if there's a different, better way of doing it. So we'll certainly go away and look at the sort of terminology around cul-de-sacs.
Yeah, I think it's in Welwyn Garden City. There's a cul-de-sac systems where they basically have like a roundabout in the middle. So it's kind of like a hybrid between like a grid system and a cul-de-sac, and that works quite well. And what people like about that is the fact that when they look out their window, they're not looking straight out to another person's window. They're quite far away. And also with the roundabout, you could also have like a little park in there as well, so kids can play or whatever, and or trees. And again, encourages parking around there as well, doesn't it? So yeah, thank you.
Councillor Wimhurst.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question, just regarding the people building the houses effectively. In my division at the moment, we've got several reasonably large estates that have been half built. The developers have gone bust. The roads still aren't adopted by highways, and they look like, you know, there's potholes all through them where it hasn't been resurfaced, and it looks like it could be outside Kamini's house at the moment. It's an absolute state. What do we have in place to mitigate against that if the developers we're using go bust and we get half-built things everywhere and it just looks ridiculous? Thank you.
Yeah, we are aware of ongoing, should we say, developers who have gone bust across the county. Different part of the legislation, really not an awful lot to do with the design code, but the Section 38 reference in the design code is Section 38 of the Highways Act, and it's the Highways Act which gives us the enforcement powers to, should we say, minimise and or prevent and or step in these situations. So without getting into too much detail, as part of the Section 38 process, what we do when the developers sign into those agreements with us, we take a surety, which is basically a pot of money or an insurance policy. So if a developer does go bust, we have the means in relation to money to go in and complete these developments for the benefit, obviously, of the communities that live on them.
Wonderful, thank you.
Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, thank you. I welcome the report. It looks pretty good. I'm sure that you'll be working with district councils, hand in glove, as ever. I mean, if there's any tension between the districts and the counties, I'd suggest that it's in the county's difficulty in resisting development that allows speeding and parking. A lot of the developments that we get receive an awful lot of complaints because of the perceived risk of speeding and parking, and councillors at the district level often complain that the county is not pushing back enough on that risk. Happily, before too long, the counties and the districts will all be abolished and we'll be one big happy family, so it will take that away. I wanted to push back on what Councillor Robinson said. I can hardly believe my ears. Firstly, on the affordable homes side, I don't think this is about making it easier for affordable homes. If only it were. Affordable homes in this country seem to be an afterthought, and as district authorities trying to meet the targets both for homes built, which is a recent all-time low where I am because of factors beyond our control, like foreign wars and so on. Affordable homes are tagged on, so the developers build unaffordable homes or build homes for the market. I think we call them market homes, but the alternative to market homes is affordable homes that reflects that in this country no one can afford a home, and they're tagged on, and we have prescribed targets for if you build an estate of 100 homes, then 30 of them should be affordable and for social rent. So I don't think it's about affordable for people to buy. Might be affordable for the people to build, because if they're all going out of business left, right and centre, then that's the free market. That's how it works. But the other thing that Councillor Robinson said was, I don't think we should prioritise cyclists. Well, I don't know if Councillor Robinson was ever a child, but I spent most of my childhood riding about on bikes and kicking a football. And nowadays, there is a risk, and a perceived risk, of children being at risk on bicycles, and even adults being afraid to go on a bicycle because everybody's got huge, enormous Range Rovers, often taking their kids to school where 50 years ago they would have been walking or on a bike. And the reason that it's so difficult for cyclists, including myself and anyone in the room that ever gets on a bike, the reason it is perceived as dangerous is because of all the other cars on the road. So I would take the opposite, Councillor Robinson. I should say we should not be prioritising motorists, except on motorways and on long rural roads. But if you want to get from Market Deeping to Stamford or Market Deeping to Bourne on a bicycle, it is nearly impossible. And with the state of our roads, it's not much better in a car either.
Did you want to respond to that, Justine?
I don't think there was any questions.
No.
I'm
it was
happy-
more of an observation.
No, I'm happy to comment, though, that obviously the street typologies, we are asking developers to consider the use of that road. So to avoid the cookie cutter typology of, we want a 5.5 metre wide road everywhere, which encourages speeding. So we will request reduced widths where necessary, and also thinking about that connectivity beyond the red line boundary, how that development sits within the settlement to allow those connections for people to make genuine travel choices.
Thank you. Councillor Woods.
Thanks. It was a general question, really, that that's only just sort of occurred to me. Has the thought of certain crimes gone into these planning processes and these codes and golden rules and the layouts of these estates? Because we all see all too often car thefts happening at night, and you know, in Holbeach, there were multiple caravans stolen off people's drives the other day. I just wonder, with estates where it's very open, there's no sort of privacy, whereas, you know, with cul-de-sacs, it's normally the only people in, you know, traffic that are there are people local to those homes, or, you know, families and whatever. People in cul-de-sacs, they notice things, you know, they notice if somebody's there who's not normally there, or, you know, if there's any unusual activity. I'm not sure you get the same level of that on estates like that, where it's very, like I say, open. And if I mean, I'm not a criminal, but if I was a criminal who stole cars and caravans, I would probably be looking at estates like these new build estates where there are a lot of quick, easy exit routes. I've got a friend. I've got a friend who lives on one of these estates. It was either last year or the year before. He had his Ford Mustang stolen off his drive. It was gone. They sort of rolled it off the drive a little bit away from the house, and then it was gone in 2 minutes. They never saw it again. There was 1 or 2 sightings of it from witnesses within the area, but it was just gone very, very quickly. And I just, you know, that thought occurred to me. You know, is there thought that goes into crime like theft and stuff like this with the layout of the roads? Is there anything in place to make it harder for criminals to carry out crimes like that?
Yes, I think is the answer to the question. Bearing in mind this is a hand-in-hand document and will obviously sit beside planning policies and planning considerations. But certainly through the work, and I think it's referenced by Councillor Carrington, you know, the national design guides, the other national documents, which we're obviously trying to not replicate, but obviously take opinion from. Crime and surveillance is becoming a critical consideration when we are looking at place-based design now. So again, I'm not wanting to use examples that we might not all be aware of, but again, we're trying to avoid, you know, with working with our planning colleagues, the fact that we've got estates and properties which, you know, have 6-foot high fences around them. We're trying to avoid creating remote car parking courts, which were quite popular in the early 90s, which didn't have any natural surveillance looking over them. So yes, crime prevention and surveillance is going into obviously the national thought around the design codes and our local thoughts around design codes as well. So we're trying to get people into places, we're trying to get people to feel safe in these places, but more importantly, we're trying to get that natural surveillance from the properties over these public spaces. So again, criminals, you know, don't think that there's all of these black spots in these developments where they can do what they like to cars or property or whatever takes their interest at that time. But I don't think the design code is going to solve all crime on all developments, but it is certainly aware of the issues which you've just raised.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's not, like you say, it's not going to solve all the crimes. I appreciate that, but yeah, as long as there's thought going into that, that's the main thing, I guess.
And I think, again, just coming back to some points which were raised previously, obviously Justine's presentation showed that we're about to go into the testing phase of how this works with planning applications in the coming months. But what we will also be doing with the code is testing it post-adoption. So we will be going back probably annually and doing sort of qualitative audits on it. And again, because of the way we've structured it, in it being a sort of web-based thing, we will be able to react to things which aren't working well. So again, hopefully, you know, the message has come across in previous sessions and today, but come June and it gets adopted, that is not it. This is going to be intuitive. It will react. And again, we've talked about, you know, place design principles changes all the time. And again, I don't know if it's live yet, but again, something came across my desk the other day about Active Travel England are embarking on a consultation around making places safer for women and children. So again, as and when things like that come online, we will have the opportunity to go back, reflect, see how that our code sort of supports that and make any necessary changes we need to.
Thank you again for that. It's not just a simple tick box exercise, is it, when you consider the amount of planning applications and what you've got to go through?
Yeah, I think if it was that simple, I think we'd be out of a job. But I think the reality is planning is just anything but simple.
Yeah, and it keeps taking. I think it's one of them where to and from until you can resolve. I mean, with 33 golden points to find. So we do have a couple more speakers, and then after this item we'll have a short comfort break. So, Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, I just want to come back to comments Councillor Baxter made against my comment. But what I was trying to say was, I mean, in the most legitimate way as possible, one of the reasons why we have to build 1.5 million houses in the next 4 years is because we've basically had an open door immigration system for many, many years, where we've allowed too many people into the country and we haven't managed to build enough houses. This is why houses are so expensive. This is why people like me with 4 jobs and a council job can't even afford to buy a house because it's simple supply and demand. And like you said earlier about the developments, the fact is we've had to build these houses so quickly, and we haven't put enough time into things like this. And I think this report is fantastic because it really looks at, look, if we have to build these houses, because let's face it, we're going to pretty much have an open door immigration system for the next 4 years until Labour comes out of office, something which Councillor Baxter's party also massively supports.
Point of order. I'm not in a political party.
I presume you still have affiliation with the Green Party, though.
Councillor Roberts, can we keep...
I haven't been in the Green Party for more
well,
than a decade.
You would still support an open door immigration system.
Can we keep to strategic questions, please?
Don't tell me what I... Don't tell me what to think. I'll tell you what I think.
Councillor Robertson, Councillor
I presume
Baxter,
you think that from your last affiliation of your last party.
Councillor Robertson, Councillor Baxter,
if
please.
If we're going to resort to personal attacks, which are wrong and irrelevant...
It's not an
then
attack.
If
you support that, then you support that.
I would ask Councillor Bailey to withdraw his comments.
Well, I'm not Councillor Bailey, so I'm going to withdraw my comments.
Whatever your name is.
Councillor Robertson, Councillor Baxter, please. Can we take this up after the meeting, please? This is not what we have.
I've been accused of
we
it. These developments. Most of these developments are they are for affordable housing, and we need to build these houses because we have too many people in the country.
I think that's enough immigrant bashing for one day, don't you? Man, shut up, man.
It's true. I'm sorry. It's a truth.
Councillor Robertson, please.
Point of order, Chair. I'd like to give Councillor Robinson the opportunity to apologise. If not, I will take it up with the monitoring officer after the meeting. The easier thing to do is for him to apologise.
What have I got to apologise for? The truth?
Councillor
Just
Robertson.
because you don't like the truth?
Councillor Robertson, please. You've been given the opportunity. If not, then obviously we can be taken up outside of this chamber. Thank you. Moving on, Councillor Wimhurst. No?
Thanks, Chair. I think my question's been answered already.
Oh, lovely.
People, so we'll call
Thank
that
you
a day.
very much. Councillor Reeve? No? I think that about covers everything. All right then. Thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion on the item. I'd like to propose that we have reviewed and satisfied with the details of the performance contained within the report. The officers be thanked for their presentation. Can you please raise your hands if you agree? Thank you. We will now take a short comfort break. Get yourselves a drink and we'll see you shortly, probably 5 minutes. Thank you for that. You're all refreshed. We'll move on to item 7. Salix scheme, conclusion to scheme. This item is found on pages 89 to 94 of the agenda pack. This will be reported by Chris Miller, Head of Environment, Dan Clayton, Environmental Strategy Manager, and Claire Collier, Senior Facilities Manager Compliance. Over to you, Chris. Over to you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I think there's some slides, if I don't know whether... Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, if you could go on to the next one, please. So this follows on from the report that we gave last October on our energy consumption and associated greenhouse gas emissions, and that was talking about how much energy we use across the council. This is now looking at what we can do to reduce that amount and the sort of ongoing funding that we've got. So way back in 2008, there was a scheme called the Salix Revolving Green Fund. So it was a process where there was an organisation which was backed by the Department for Trade and Industry at the time that funded energy efficiency projects and they put in a 0% loan and the county council matched that funding. And the idea was that it was a revolving fund, so the savings that you made through energy efficiency projects were reinvested into new energy efficiency projects and the money circulated round. So the council's initial investment of 497,000 over the years since then has delivered £3.5 million worth of energy efficiency projects across our estate, which has gone on to have ongoing reductions in energy costs and energy consumption over the years. So, yeah, the types of projects that we did were LED projects, and this was in LCC buildings and in LCC controlled schools as well. And we did lighting projects, we did insulation projects, we did some of the first LED street lighting projects that came out of this fund. We improved insulation in our buildings, so it's ongoing to reduce energy consumption. So if we go on to the next slide, please. And then in 2024, Salix Finance, it was always kind of a bit unclear about what would happen when the scheme closed. There was talk about that they would write off the loans, but in 2024 they announced that the scheme was going to close in March 25 to new projects, and that the money that Salix has originally invested into the scheme back in the years 2008 to 2012 would have to be repaid by the county council. So we put a stop on our ongoing projects then, and the scheme's been in a bit of hiatus, and we've been paying the money back into the pot to pay Salix back. So that was completed earlier this financial year, and now money that's coming back in from the savings is now available to do new energy efficiency schemes going forward. So over the course of the next 3 to 4 years, there should be £500,000 gets repaid into the pot that will be then available potentially to do new energy efficiency projects. So if we move on to the next. I think we reported back in October that we'd had some funding to look at our top 40. It ended up being the top 41 energy consuming buildings. So we've had detailed energy audits that have been led with corporate property to look at what opportunities there are in the buildings to reduce energy consumption further. So that work's been done. It's identified more LED lighting projects, improved controls and building management systems. There's also some solar PV projects that are identified, and we've looked at high and low cost options for those, the payback periods, and the ongoing savings that would be achieved through those. So we've got a list of round about 300 potential projects that could be delivered, and the idea is that we prioritise the ones that give the shortest payback periods. So if we move on to the final slide, please. So the conclusion is that we're now getting these funds into the system, so it'll be about £120,000 a year for the next 3 or 4 years. And the proposal is that we use these these funds to deliver the list of projects we've identified, and liaising with corporate property to make sure that the future of the buildings are certain. So we don't want to do projects in buildings that are about to get rid of. So we're going to make sure that there's a future for those buildings going forward, beyond sort of LGR date as well. So that's what we're looking to do, and I will open it to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dan. Do we have any questions? Councillor Sneath.
Thank you. I'll start off with a question. I've got a million questions, and I'm sure my dad's watched me online thinking he's going to geek out over this. So I will start off with just saying I think it's a really positive thing that we've had to kickstart a lot of projects, and it's given us now the opportunity to reinvest into the council savings. But what criteria will be used to prioritise the next set of projects? Will it be the payback, carbon reduction, or enhancing the buildings? Thank you.
So primarily it's going to be payback, but we want to make sure that it is going to enhance and provide the best sort of value for money that we're going to get. But it is really around energy consumption is where we're focusing at the moment, and making sure that we can reduce that in the buildings that we're going to be looking at.
Just want to come back on that, Chairman. So on the payback, are you looking at the actual building usage, or have you just had a energy survey such as an EPC and it's given you a generalisation of if you did this you would return that, or have you actually looked at how the building is used and how long it's used for and everything? Because we know if you looked at an EPC, it's a very blunt instrument and just makes every building somewhere near Birmingham and usage from 9 till 5. And if you look at a school, that's not how that building is used. Thank you.
Absolutely, you're completely correct there. The initial 41 sites that were identified were based solely upon, I understand, on consumption and payback. However, moving forward, we want to do the projects, take into account everything that you've mentioned there. So we have the EPCs, we have the DECs, we're undertaking regular site visits at the moment to all of our properties. And so we want to take all of that into account to then highlight the ones that are going to most benefit to how we operate.
Wonderful. Chairman, I'll leave it there, let everybody else have some questions, but we'll probably come back later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Woods.
Thank you, Chair. Will we be receiving like performance dashboards to show us how it's all going, how much savings have been made, just to see that we're on track and that you know what's been implemented is actually working and delivering those energy cost savings, please?
In short, yes. Our intention is to monitor and demonstrate the effectiveness of what we've undertaken. Yes.
Brilliant, thank you.
Councillor Reeve.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I appreciate the system and project is coming to an end in terms of the Salix involvement. I just wondered if you know what sort of incentive Salix had. You said that they were DTI backed. So are they a government organisation? Are they a private organisation? What was their incentive to put all this money forward? Are they also linked to the producers of LED light bulbs or something? I'm just thinking going forward, if something else comes along again, what's their incentive behind them? I understand Lincolnshire County Council incentive if it's interest-free money for us to get these projects up and running, but I just wondered what we're kind of letting ourselves in for in terms of their incentive.
Yeah, so the original Salix Finance scheme, I think they were a not-for-profit organisation, so they've been set up for the sole purpose of kind of reducing public sector energy consumption, because there was a recognition that public sector organisations maybe didn't have the capital to start off doing these larger scale energy efficiency schemes. So I believe at the start they received some DTI funding to get the scheme going, but then I think they also went out to the sort of capital markets to get additional funds as well. And then over the years, it's kind of developed, and they've moved kind of closer to central government. And I think what's happening now is that they've effectively become part of the Great British Energy Group that's been set up within central government. So that's the sort of history of them.
Thank you. It's good to hear that something positive's come out of the Great British Energy, because since its name was first mentioned, it's the first thing I've heard it's actually done. Thank you.
Councillor Carrington.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the report. Chairman, just a couple of points, really. Firstly, the question of payback. I understand you're saying we're going to go for the shortest payback. There is potentially a tension between going for the shortest payback and going for what you might call the best payback, and I'm thinking of particular examples here, not only in terms of energy saving but also carbon reduction, but I'm going on from that to say that you might get payback in a slightly longer term, but with, for example, an ongoing financial return. And I'm thinking particularly there of solar PV. That takes me back to the meeting in November, which Mr. Clayton referred to, where we talked indeed about solar PV. At North Kesteven, where I'm dual-hatted, we had just spent several £100,000, many hundreds of £1,000s, more than £500,000, I think, on putting solar PV on all of our buildings that would take it, and that had a payback of 8.5 years. Now, of course, that might be longer than some other projects, but after that 8.5 years, on a product with a lifetime of at least 25 years, you're selling that electricity to the grid and you are making money. And we're going to make a lot of money at North Kesteven on that. Now, whether it's part of the Salix replacement programme or not, I thought that the outcome of that meeting we had in November, and I seem to remember raising it as a correction to the minutes in the following meeting, was that we would have a report to this committee about what buildings in the County Council's estate were capable of taking solar, and an evaluation in its own right of the use of that. And I was thinking particularly of this combination, yes, on the one hand, of reducing energy consumption and reducing carbon footprint, but also the long-term opportunity for this council to generate returns to be reinvested in our services. So I just flag that. Yes, this report is about Salix and Salix replacement. What do we do now? But there is that broader issue, which I hope this committee won't forget, because I do think that there are opportunities across our estate for solar which should be addressed and brought back to this forum. Thank you, Chairman.
Just on that, did you want to respond to that, Claire? 'Cause I've just seen you make a note of that. Does that mean you will be bringing something back?
I wasn't specifically going to respond to that, but I have made a note just to raise that with the office to see what the outcome of that was.
Fantastic, thank you. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. This is an absolute no-brainer, even for people who are sceptical about the impending catastrophe of climate change. It's still worth doing because it brings money back into the council's coffers. Personally, I think it would be the right thing is to do the payback that has the biggest bang for the buck, whether that's because it's the biggest return each year or the quickest return altogether. But I think I might be minded, if I was Councillor Brooks, to have a range of schemes going from the simplest passive infrared light switch through to the largest solar PV array on buildings, of course, because it gives us an opportunity not just to save the council money and to save carbon, but also to show that community leadership role. So having Councillor Brooks and anybody else to stand in front of these schemes and say, look, here we are, we're the county council, we're investing in this technology because it saves people money, why don't you do it at home? Or even further, why don't you, house builders, start integrating it into your building programmes? Because apart from the viability of buildings, every building by now really should have, it should be south-facing if possible, it should have solar PV and batteries, if possible it should have EV charging connection if possible, but it should have grey water recycling where where possible, which is almost everywhere, but it doesn't tend to happen because either estate agents don't like it or the industry says it can't afford it, which is tosh. So anyway, I'd move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions, comments? Councillor Sneap?
Thank you. I can only agree with Councillor Baxter on this. We need to have passive buildings. We need to have buildings that are able to be heated from a candle. The older buildings, they're going to take a lot of internal or external insulation. We will get there. I think we ought to really have a little subcommittee to actually look at these buildings that have been identified, because I think there's enough knowledge in the room that we could sit there from our previous experience through district councils about what we've done and with our own local knowledge, look at those buildings and work out what would actually be the best project for that building and the current occupants of that building, not just looking at bang for buck, quick returns. We need to be able to show that the people that are using those buildings that we have thought about what we are doing to that building to help them. As pointed out, solar PV can be used to generate income, not just supply the energy for the building. So sometimes it may be that the energy is not needed, but the income from it is actually better for that building. And yeah, that's the only thing I would like to say is that I think we ought to have a subcommittee on it to look at those buildings and then come back to committee. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that. And do we have anybody else? No, that's fine. Right, I'd like to propose that we have reviewed satisfied with the details of performance contained within the report and that the officers be thanked for their presentation. Can you all please raise your hand if you agree? Thank you. That is agreed. Item 8, Environmental Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. This item is on pages 95 to 100 of the agenda pack. This item enables the committee to comment on the content of its work programme.
Sorry, Chair. If I heard you right, you said that we note the content of the report and we thank the officers for the content.
Yeah.
Do we not also need to recommend that the Executive Directors for Environment and Resources develop a programme of energy efficiency investments using the income from the closed sailing scheme?
Yes.
I would propose that, please.
Right. Second it, yeah. All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Baxter. I think Joseph already made a note about the subcommittee as well. Yeah, thank you. This report will be presented by Anna Coldclough, Scrutiny Officer. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Chair. So on the next meeting on the 15th of May, we have 4 substantive items on the agenda currently. The update to the Lincolnshire Coast 2100 Plus programme, adoption of the local nature recovery strategy, Lincolnshire Minerals and Waste local plan, and Anglian Water Lincolnshire Reservoir, and then an item for information only on the carbon capture storage schemes, safety and environmental impacts. Thank you.
Any members wish to comment on the work programme? Councillor Carrington.
Thank you. 2 points, Chairman. The first one, on our agenda today, we had Flood Risk Management Authority's update. We did not have with us in that debate a representative from Anglian Water. We're next due to discuss that at our meeting on the 19th of June. I wonder whether it would be possible to encourage, it's usually Matt Moore or another AW member to come. What's particularly in my mind is that I am aware of a document which will be, I've seen in draft, which will be published, I believe on the 1st of April by Anglian Water, which looks in detail at the capacity of their various water treatment plants. In other words, their capacity to deal with sewage. That in turn has a significant impact both on the potential for pollution, particularly at times of flood, but also we were talking earlier about housing, where it is possible for houses to be built, however well those developments may be designed. It's an extraordinarily important thing. My understanding is there will be a couple of water treatment plants within our county which may be affected on this. We'll have to wait for the document to be published, but it would be helpful if we could have at the next scheduled meeting where we're dealing with water, if we could have an AW an AW representative to comment on that matter. The only other thing I was going to mention was, and I did touch base with officers after we'd debated it, it's a matter of course for the chair, but if colleagues think that it would be helpful to have a briefing from the County Council's planning liaison, highways officers, that hidden world that we don't often see, certainly I would back that, but again, rather like Councillor Sneath in another area, I may be a bit geeky on this subject. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Carrington. I think all your comments will be taken away. I'm sure the officers will be using those comments accordingly to get the information that hopefully we can bring that forward prior to them coming, or at least when they do arrive. So, do we have anybody else wishing to comment on that? Councillor Reeve?
It's probably a different department with Anglian Water, but I think somebody needs to ask them the question of, they're pushing that everybody in Lincolnshire has water meters because they say there's not enough drinking water available, and yet they've just put in a massive pipeline from Elsham Wold all the way through to Leicestershire, I think it is, to take water from our county into neighbouring counties, and I just would like somebody to explain why that is happening at the same time saying we've not got enough water and we all have to have water meters, if that's possible.
Thank you, Councillor Reeve. I've made a note of that, and we'll explore if it's possible to have a report on that information. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anybody else wish to comment? No, thank you for that. This concludes discussion on the item. I move that we approve the planned programme of 26. It's subject to the consideration of any of the highlighted comments in today's discussion. You please raise your hand if you agree. Thank you. That is agreed. This concludes the business of today's meeting. Thank you for everyone for attendance and your contributions. Have a safe journey home. And if I don't see you before, have a happy Easter.